Hey there, it's Speer Communications. Welcome back to another review, this time of Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes. This is the second film that he directed, and this is a movie that I had heard things about. I'd never actually seen the film. I'd seen the remake by Alexander Aja, and I enjoyed that. And so I really went into this with very low expectations, much like I did with Last House on the Left. Well, actually, I had a little bit higher expectations for that, considering its reputation. This film was considered a cult classic by a lot of people, but it's not considered a lot of people to be a really great movie, I would say. It got mixed reviews when it came out, but I was surprised by this film. I like this movie. I honestly would say the remake by Alexander Aja is a better movie. Um, It has a little bit more of what I'm looking for out of a horror film, but I still like this movie. I still found it to be entertaining. I thought it was engrossing enough. I wasn't really bored by the film. I liked the characters. I thought Wes Craven's direction was really well done. I even liked the concept behind the film, the idea of this family of inbred hill people attacking a bunch of people stranded in the desert, in the high plains, in the hills. I like that, and yeah, overall, I really, honestly, I really like this movie. Hills of Eyes is a film that Wes Craven directed and wrote. It was released in 1977. It stars Dee Wallace, who you might recognize her from The Howling and a few other films that she's done later in her career. She plays a character named Lynn Wood. This is her first big breakout role for her. Before, she had done just a little Christian low budget movie, and this is the first big breakout role for Dee Wallace. It also stars Susan Lanier as Brenda Carter. You have Michael Berryman as Pluto, one of the hill people. Uh, John Steadman plays Fred. Robert Houston plays Bobby Carter. Martin Speer plays Doug Wood. Russ Grieve plays Bob Carter. James Whitworth plays Papa Jupiter. Virginia Vincent plays Ethel Carter. Lance Gordon plays Mars. Janus Blythe plays Ruby. Gordy Clark plays Mama. Cordy Clark, actually. Cordy Clark plays Mama. Arthur King plays Mercury. Uh, which actually I don't believe is right. The guy who plays Mercury is actually, I think, Pete Locke, actually. Not Arthur King, really. The producer of the film. But I could be wrong. Brenda Marinoff plays baby Katie Wood. So she plays the baby in the film. The basic gist of the plot is this. At a rundown gas station in the middle of the desert, an old man, Fred, played by John Steadman, who I thought did a good job performance-wise, especially during the sequence where he's talking about the past. He's talking to Bob about Fred telling him about he's telling him about the story of his son's family of deranged cannibals that live in the hills. Just telling him about the history of what happened with his son, and so forth and so on, which I'll get to a little bit later. So it starts out at this rundown gas station in the middle of the desert. An old man named Fred, played by John Steadman, he's packing his truck when a ragged and somewhat feral teenage girl named Ruby, played by Janus Blythe, approaches him. She offers to trade what she has in her bag for food, but the old man refuses. They then walk into a small cabin, and Fred scolds her for what they have done. Ruby says that her family ambushed a nearby airfield because they were hungry and no one passes by their home anymore. She then pleads with Fred to take her with him, but he refuses and warns Ruby that she could be in danger if the pack, in particular someone named Papa Jupiter, learns what she is doing. She replies that his life will be in danger as well if Jupiter finds out that he's trying to leave. A noise distracts them, and then Ruby hides. The Carter family is then traveling on vacation, towing a travel trailer from Ohio to Los Angeles. Their family from Cleveland. And parents Bob, played by Russ Grieve, and Ethel, played by Virginia Vincent, are driving, accompanied by their teenage children. Bobby, played by Robert Houston. Brenda, played by Susan Lanier. I don't know exactly how to pronounce her last name, but I did like her character. I thought she had a lot of fun lines of dialogue. She's the one that's No, but do you think there's a place around here that you can find a cheeseburger around here? Or, man, I could really use a cheeseburger. Or talking about, oh man, we stay out here long enough, we're gonna become human French fries. So I liked her character. I definitely did feel for her when things start to get really intense for her later in the film. And then her eldest daughter, Lynn, played by Dee Wallace. Lynn's husband, Doug, played by Martin Speer, who looks like a spitting image of Sonny Bono, and their baby daughter, Katie, and their dogs, Beauty and Beast, which Wes Craven even admitted that he did that on purpose to try to have this sort of idea of Beauty getting, Beast getting revenge over the death of Beauty. So I thought it was kind of interesting to have the dogs named Beauty and Beast. They then stop at Fred's oasis for fuel. Fred urges them to stay in the main road as they leave. Fred's truck suddenly explodes, preventing him from leaving. Ignoring Fred's warning, the Carters skid off a desert road and crash because of these low-flying jet airplanes that are flying around the area. Bob then walks back to Fred's oasis to get help. The dogs become very panicky and start barking at the hills. Beauty runs off into the hills where she's attacked by someone. Bobby chases after her and finds her mutilated body. Frightened, he runs and then falls, knocking himself unconscious. As the night falls, Bob reaches the gas station where he finds Fred trying to hang himself. Fred then tells him his son's family of deranged cannibals that live in the hills through which the Carters are traveling. So he tells him about this story of his son, Papa Jupiter, played by James Whitworth, who I thought did a really good job with the performance. He was a very imposing presence. He was very intimidating, although the makeup on his face didn't really look that great. But I thought his performance was good. I thought it was an intimidating performance. I really was genuinely freaked out by this guy and really thought that he could really do a lot of damage. And the scene where he's talking to basically his dead dad is pretty intense. Where he's like, I'm gonna. And they don't really have the quote on IMDb, which I'm surprised they don't have that quote. And he's talking about how he's gonna eat your children's children, and he's in it just really intense. All the while eating his father. So that's definitely pretty messed up. So they're commanded by Papa Jupiter, James Whitworth, who killed his mother, Fred's wife, during childbirth. Actually, that's really not what happened. What really happened was he killed his, because this is going off of Wikipedia, and he almost killed his mother during childbirth because he came out sideways and he weighed like 20 pounds. And he had like hair all over his body. He was some wild mutant. And what happened, though, is later on, as a child, he killed the livestock on his father's farm and then murdered his sister. And then ended up killing his wife as well. And then Fred then attacked his son with a tire iron and left him in the hills to die. However, Jupiter survived, and he had children with a depraved alcoholic prostitute known as Mama, played by Cordy Clark. Together, they had 3 sons: Mars, played by Lance Gordon; Pluto, played by Michael Berryman; and Mercury, and an abused daughter, Ruby. They survived by stealing from and cannibalizing travelers, which this concept is based upon a true story, where Wes Craven was inspired by this true story of this real-life family in the 1700s. And this real-life it's loosely based on the legend of Sawney Bean and his family. A wife, 8 sons, and 6 daughters. A feral clan who inhabited and roamed the highlands of Scotland's East Lothian County near Edinburgh in the early 1400s. They captured, tormented, and ate several transients. Then they were eventually captured, and on the order of Scotland's King James, they were judged to be insane and executed without trial. The executions of the Bean clan all allegedly involved grotesque tortures, inspiring the aspect of the film that the Carter family ends up becoming as brutal as their attackers when they seek revenge. So, in a lot of ways, it's another way for Wes Craven to expand upon the things he was talking about with civilized man becoming the real savage that he talked about in Last House on the Left. So it's expanding more upon that concept, which I honestly didn't mind. Actually, I liked it better in this film than it was used in Last House on the Left, to be honest. Had a better contrast. It's not just a bunch of, there's crazy people in the hills here, but the characters were better, the characters were stronger, and I bought it more with the retaliation of the characters in this film versus what was going on Last House on the Left, where this seemingly innocent family all of a sudden just becomes sadistic killers. Here, it actually made sense, because you could see why they would go the lengths that they did, especially Lynn's husband Doug, because they killed his wife, they brutally shot his wife's mother, they raped his wife's younger sister, and they stole his baby. So I could totally see why he reacted the way that he did in the film. And you got to do what you got to do to survive. So later in the plot, Brenda then finds Bobby, who's shaken up about Beauty, and then returns to the trailer, but he doesn't mention Beauty's death, not wanting to frighten the rest of the family. He then gets locked out of the trailer and asks Doug for his keys, unaware that the trailer is locked because Pluto is looking through their valuables, which I thought was a pretty tense sequence. While Effa and Brendel sleep. Brenda, I don't know who the fuck Brendel is. Seth Brundle? I don't know. But Ethel and Brenda are sleeping, and this concept of a wild hill person, like a mutant, just unbeknownst to you, just rummaging through your trailer home while you're sleeping, is pretty terrifying to me, especially since I've been in a lot of travel trailers. I've gone camping a lot of times, and that's a concept that just the idea of someone being there watching you without your knowledge it's always really creepy to me. Before Bobby enters the trailer, Pluto then signals Papa Jupiter to set Bob on fire on a stake in the distance. What they actually do is a pretty intense sequence where they stuff something in his throat, and then they crucify him to a Joshua tree. Which, at the time that this film was being made, and still to this day, a Joshua tree is protected. It's a protected plant. So Wes Craven and the producer, Pete Locke, just said to everyone, just said, okay, don't look the other way, and they just lit a Joshua tree on fire. So just said, fuck it, we can't find a tree in the middle of the High Plains desert over here, so fuck it, we're just gonna light a Joshua tree on fire and hope that we don't get caught. This is definitely a low-budget film. This is made for $230,000. But to Wes Craven, it was a lot of money because he only had $90,000 to work with The Last House on the Left, and he only had like a crew of a few people. And with Hills Have Eyes, he had a crew of 15, including a director of photography who worked on a lot of Roger Corman films, who worked on Death Race 2000, among others. So we finally had a somewhat experienced cinematographer and DP to work with, and a larger crew. So anyway, so they light the Joshua tree on fire, and that was pretty brutal, really. It's an awful way to die, crucifying someone to a Joshua tree and then lighting them on fire. Ethel, Lynn, Doug, and Bobby rush to save Bob, while Brenda stays in the trailer with the baby. As they try to extinguish the fire, Pluto and Mars ransack the camper in a very intense, suspenseful, spine-tingling, nail-biting sequence where Mars and Pluto just start ransacking the trailer, and they end up kidnapping the baby. And just the concept of these mutants going in and stealing a baby is enough to get me all riled up and get me all disturbed, so to speak. And yes, it's not baby rape, for instance, like fucking Serbian film, but it doesn't need to be. It's still shocking enough that it still gets your pulse racing. I just, the concept of stealing a baby from somebody is pretty messed up, and definitely is something that is one of those sequences where you're just like, oh shit, what the no, don't do that, don't take the baby, what are you doing, this is not right, stop this. And that's exactly how the actor who played Pluto, Michael Berryman, he felt about that sequence as well while he was watching in the theater. He's like, this is some messed up shit. He's like, don't take the baby. Just stop it here. Don't kill the baby. I love you. Whatever you don't do, don't kill it. And that became a sort of a issue on the set of the film, because there was a Wes Craven was considering maybe killing the baby, and the cast and crew were like, "You kill that baby, and we're gone. We're not staying on this set if you kill that baby." So of course they did not end up killing the baby in the film, but the actors who played the hill folk, the hill mutants, Michael Berryman and the other cast members, they had fun with it, and they every time there was a scene with the baby, they'd just be like, "Kill the baby. Kill the baby." It's like, no, we're not killing the baby. We're not doing that. So I thought that was pretty fun. Not the idea of killing the baby. It's just the concept of them having fun with such morbid fun with killing a baby. But it shows you how much fun these actors had making this film, even under miserable conditions, 120-degree weather, just awful. Had to get in cars and jeeps and drive 35 miles away from civilization to shoot the sequences on the location that they chose for the film, which actually is an amazing location. That the location itself is a really big high point for the film for me. I really do get what Wes Craven was going for. He wanted to find a location that looked primordial, something that looked like something from back in the age of the dinosaurs or the cavemen, and so it really does look like that. The hills, and the area that they chose, the rock cliffs, and the high desert. I think it was somewhere in Arizona, I believe, and it was a really well chosen setting for the film. It was creepy too. Just the rocks themselves were a big part of why the film had this eerie feel to it, especially at night. Now, so they rush to save Bob. Pluto Mars ransack the camper. They steal the baby, and Lynn actually didn't really rush to save Bob. Lynn actually is in the camper. Lynn's in the camper. She gets, yeah, they do rush to save Bob, and then they get in the trailer, and then Mars and Pluto end up ransacking it. Mars starts trying to, I don't think it was Mars tries to rape Brenda. He's raping Brenda. Carter's extinguished the fire. Bob dies shortly afterward. Ethel loses it. She's like, "That's not my Bob! That's not my Bob! That can't be my Bob!" And then Ethel and Lynn then return to the trailer, and then Lynn is attacked by Mars. Ethel hits him with a broom. After Mars shoots Ethel and Lynn, he kills Lynn, shoots her twice. Pluto abducts the baby, and the brothers flee. And that is a very intense sequence. That sequence I mentioned earlier just really got this nail-biting suspense for me, because I liked Dee Wallace's character. I didn't want her to get hurt. I didn't want her to die. And these sick fucks are gonna steal her baby, and she tries her best to fight back, but she dies. She gets shot to death. Her mother also gets shot, mortally wounded, and then Brenda gets raped by Pluto in a really that's an uncomfortable scene to watch, at least for me personally. I thought that was an even more uncomfortable rape scene than the rape scene in Last House on the Left for me. Uh, the acting by Susan Lanier was really effective, really good performance. And her agent advised her not to do this movie, but she did it because she's a big fan of Wes Craven and she's a big fan of horror films. And I have to admit, I think it was a good decision on her part. And there's a fun little bit of trivia from the making of the film, where they were getting ready to shoot this rape scene, and Brenda, the character Susan Lanier, who plays Brenda, she decided, okay, let's lighten the mood. Instead of a rape scene, just have a passionate love scene. like you're in love with me. And so Michael Berryman and Susan Lanier had this really romantic love scene, and it got the crowd, got everyone in the cast and crew just cracking up. And Wes really liked that because he was like, okay, that's a really good thing. I'm really glad you did that, Susan, because you were able to lighten the mood and enable them to be able to shoot the rape scene afterwards and make it not as uncomfortable to shoot. So I just thought it was kind of a little bit of fun trivia there on dealing with a really uncomfortable sequence. So Pluto abducts the baby. The brothers flee. Hearing their screams, Doug and Bobby rush to the camper to find Len dead and Ethel mortally wounded. The men of the clan then return to the cave, but Beast pushes Mercury off a hilltop, which he falls to his death. And I really like this concept that the film had. The idea of the dog, Beast, taking out these hill mutants. I thought it was pretty cool. I really like that. I like the idea of the dog going out on his own and taking them out. I thought that was different. Animal versus animal, so to speak. Beast versus other beasts. So yeah, I definitely was rooting for the dog to like kill all of these guys. So he kills Mercury. I like the line of dialogue that Michael Berryman had. I think Mars has, where Michael Berryman's like, "I swear I heard him fall," and then Mars is like, "Yeah, you know, you have rocks in your head, asshole." So I thought it was pretty funny. And there's a few other lines of dialogue I like from the film too, which I'll get to a little bit later when I go more in depth on my pros and cons of the film. But yeah, so they return to the cave. Mercury gets pushed off a cliff by Beast. Ruby then is chained outside the cave, Mama tormenting her, and she is forced to eat Beauty as a punishment for her betrayal. She doesn't really want to do it because she doesn't really like eating dog. The next morning, shortly after Ethel dies, Doug sets out to find his baby, while Papa Jupiter and Pluto set out to kill the survivors. Beast tears Pluto's throat out, and actually Beast earlier incapacitated Pluto by basically ripping up his ankle really badly. And he then tears his throat out. And then Papa Jupiter is then killed by a trap set by Brenda and Bobby using their mother's corpse, which is a very messed up concept that this film comes up with. And so, I mean, can you just imagine that idea? Use your mother's corpse as bait to trap this killer who's trying to kill you. It's ingenious, but at the same time, it definitely is pretty sick and depraved. And the concept was exactly what they did was really clever, and it was exactly what I was thinking. I was like, just trap him and blow that camper up, blow his ass up with the camper. But then you have this whole sort of problem where Bobby, Robert Houston, goes back to see if he's really dead. He's not. Oh, it's a surprise scare. Papa Jupiter tries to attack him, and then it's Brenda who kills him with an axe. Doug then sees Ruby knock out Mama and then escape with Katie into the hills. Doug then catches up with Ruby and the baby, and this is really a suspenseful scene for me because the baby and everything that's involved with that and so forth and so on. The baby's in danger. You want Doug to be able to get the baby back. Ruby gets the baby away. Mars is trying to go after kill Ruby and kill the baby. As he tries to kill Doug, Ruby then interferes by putting a rattlesnake on Mars's neck, which I thought was another clever way to stop Mars from killing Doug, enabling Doug to overpower him, and then Doug frantically stabs Mars to death while Ruby weeps over her brother's body. And then the movie has this freeze frame of Doug stabbing Mars, and then red, and then it all goes to red, and the end. And I get the point. I guess if Wes Craven really wanted to slam home the point that civilized man is just as savage, if not more savage than the savages. I understand it, I get it, but it leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Like, did they get the fuck out of the middle of nowhere in the desert? Is the baby okay? Because last time I knew it was left somewhere in the rock somewhere. How's the dog? Is Beast still alive? what's going to happen with Ruby? It's really not that explained very well. Except there actually was an alternate ending, which you see on this DVD, this 2-disc DVD from Anchor Bay, where you see an alternate ending, but it's really not very well done, and I'm okay with the ending they used over the alternate ending, but I honestly think a better ending that tied up some more loose ends uh, would have been better for the film, for me personally. The way it ends just feels like, see, man is the real savage. I get it. I understand. Yeah, I get it. It just seems abrupt. But yeah, that's the plot of Hills Have Eyes. And now we're getting some pros. I just want to talk about some pros, some cons, give my final rating on the film. Um, yeah, I thought I thought Wes Craven's direction was really well done. I really love the shots he did when he was setting up the location, shooting the rocks, the sequences at night of the clouds rolling in over the rocky hills. I thought were really eerie, and really set a great atmosphere and mood that the film really needed in order for it to work as well as it did for me. I also thought that it felt less amateurish. It was an exploitation film. It's a low budget movie, $230,000 film, but the direction, it looked a lot more polished than it did in Last House on the Left. It had exploitation themes, but it didn't really look like an exploitation film to me. There were some shots in it that were just gorgeous. And that's a testament to Wes Craven and his talent, and to the cinematographer, Eric Sarian. I also like the music by Don Peake. I didn't care for the music used in the alternate ending, but for the most part, I liked the music. I thought it also helped set the mood really well. I thought most of the performances were really good. I like Susan Lanier as Brenda. I liked her before she was raped as a very fun-loving character, and I thought it was believable, her transformation into this shy, sheltered person afterwards, who after she was raped and then lost her mother and all of this, and then I really did root for her when she ultimately picked up that axe and gave up Papa Jupiter a few whacks. I like Michael Berryman as Pluto. He had a fun sense of humor about his character. I really like the scene where he's masquerading as a Navy guy while Bobby's trying to ask for help. And he's all like, stand on your head. Stand on your head and stick your thumb up your... It was like, oh, defenses. So I thought that was pretty funny. It was like, stand on your head and stick your thumb up your ass, pretty much. So I like Michael Berryman. Michael Berryman, I had a lot of fun with the film, and it shows. There's a story where he ends up talking about while he was seeing the film in the theater when it came out. The audience, there's one woman in the audience who got up and said, "This is sick and depraved." And then Michael Berryman ended up, when she sat down, he looked over her shoulder and he said, "Damn right it is, lady. It's sick." I thought that was pretty. So you can tell how much fun that Michael Berryman has with the role, and yeah, this is definitely a role he'll probably be remembered for the most for in a lot of ways is his character in this film. And so yeah, I like Michael Berryman. I really like Dee Wallace as Lynn Wood. She would show her acting chops, so to speak, that she would go on to use for multiple other films later in her career. John Steadman, I really liked as Fred. I really loved the speech that he had with Bob, Carter, Russ Grieve, where he was telling them about the past of that dealt with his son and so forth and so on. It reminded me of a little bit of a precursor to what the kind of thing that Loomis would start talking about when it came to talking about Michael Myers. It was a really good performance, and I thought there's a chilling sequence. And all it was pretty much just talking about what had happened in the past, more than anything else. Robert Houston, I'll talk about him later. Martin Spears, Doug Wood, not the greatest actor in the world, but as the film went on, I thought he was decent enough. Uh, Pretty decent for a Sonny Bono lookalike. I definitely did feel for him, and I did root for him as the film went on, as it got into its climax. Um, James Whitworth, I love his Papa Jupiter. Already talked about that. Very tall, imposing, intense presence. Great casting choice. Virginia Vincent as Ethel. She was solid too as a mother. She did well with what she had to work with. I did like Russ Grieve as Bob Carter, the father. I really like some of the, I like he was always saying, "God damn this, God damn that, God damn him, God damn it." And then I like the scene where he's talking about his wife's trying to say, "Calm down, your heart. Remember, just go to the doctor and have that checked out." Oh, that doctor can shove his stethoscope right. It's just like language, honey. It is like right back into his bag, sideways. So I actually like that character. So I did feel for him when he died, and it was an awful way to die too, horrible way to die. And Lance Gordon liked his Mars. Janus Blythe I thought did a good job of what little she had to work with as a Ruby, but the concept of a feral girl was actually pretty interesting. Just the concept of the feral family I liked, anyway. Yes, they didn't look like mutants. Alexandra Aja's film in 2006 would definitely expand upon that more and really showcase them as mutants. But and they did kind of look like Flintstones rejects with all of their bones and stuff like that. But it didn't really bother me that much because I was invested in the story and the characters. So uh, the costume design didn't bug me that much, to be honest. And Courtney Clark was already his mom, and she didn't really have to do that much. But overall, yeah, and I thought it was well edited by Wes Craven, who also edited the film. He also wrote the film. I thought he did a good job writing it. Um, and I know originally the film was supposed to be titled Blood Relations. That's what Wes Craven wanted to call it, but I'm glad he didn't go with that because I actually really liked the title Hills Have Eyes. And the producers in the studio really liked it as well. And it really fits the film because for the most part, early in the film, you barely see any glimpses of these hill folk, of this family that lives in the hills. You just hear things, you see eyes maybe peering through some bushes, and that really added to the suspense for me. And it really made the film very harrowing and eerie. And less is more when it in that approach. And the film was definitely the most effective when they were in the shadows and in the hills. When you didn't see them, when you saw them, then it got kind of, I have to admit, kind of got kind of campy. But at the end of the day, it still don't bug me that much because I still ultimately enjoyed the film, regardless. Now, when it comes to cons, I could use a little bit more violence, a little bit more blood. I mean, I did think it was nasty and sick, and definitely did have this edge to it, but could have used a little bit more. No, Alexandre Aja's film definitely does do a much better job in that regard. Um, but yeah, and that was, I guess, originally it was a lot more violent. It was given the next rating by the MPAA. And there's a scene where Fred is beaten to death by Jupiter, and that was cut down a lot to get an R rating. So, and here's for some more scenes. Scene where Mars and Pluto kidnap the baby was also cut down. Originally, while eating Big Bob's arm, Jupiter thrust it into Big Bob's face and stuck its finger into Bob's eye. More of this scene was also cut down. The scene where Katie hits Jupiter in the back with an axe is cut down. The scene where Doug repeatedly stabs Mars is cut down, but apparently all the cuts were snuck back in. So the reason why it's not very bloody or violent is there's still blood in this and there's still a little bit of gore, but not a lot of it, is because of the MPAA, Motion Picture Association of Assholes. And this footage is sadly lost and probably will never be found ever again because it was cut. It was cut and then left on the cutting room floor and rotted, never to be seen again. So that's really too bad that those are lost clips and footage from Hills Have Eyes that will more than likely never be seen uh, by anyone in the near future, if ever. So that's really too bad. Um, so yeah, I could use a little bit more violence and more blood, but I guess it originally was there, but the MPA cut it out. Um, I honestly didn't find the pacing to be that bad. I didn't find the film boring, and I found it to be actually pretty. It had a pretty brisk pacing, so that's not a con for me. But another con I would say is definitely the ending. I thought it was abrupt. It didn't really solve a lot of the problems. It didn't. It really. It had left a lot of questions unanswered, and yeah, I really could have had a little bit better ending, in my opinion. But yeah, that's really honestly the only problems I have with the film. Could have had a little bit more violence and gore, as that's the type of guy I am. But because it did feel like a slasher movie in the hills in the desert, which in a lot of ways is kind of a precursor to something like Friday the 13th. I mean, there's even a scene where there's a dead body on a door, which I'm like, it kind of reminds me of something in Friday the 13th. I think it was not really a dead. It was Bob trying to hang himself, but still. And then there was a scene where Jupiter breaks through the glass and attacks Bob and drags him away, which is a jump scare sequence. And the sequence is very similar to a sequence in Friday the 13th Part 2 where Warrington Gillette smashes through the window. So there's a little bit of sort of stuff you'd see in later slasher films. And another thing I wanted to mention real quick before I go is there's a subtleness about this film. This low budget feel to it adds to the movie's edge and gives it this gritty, down and dirty feel to it, which I really honestly liked a lot. And there's a sequence in the film that I really like that's very simple, but I thought was really well done, where Bob is I believe, yeah, Bob Carter. He's going around and he's investigating the gas station, the shack at night, and he hears this howling, and then he goes up to this empty pot or something, this metal pot that's sitting on a stand somewhere. He puts his hand over the pot, and the sound stops. I like that bit of sound editing. I thought that was really clever, where it's like creepy howling of the wind, like woo, and then he puts his hand over the pot, and then it stops, lets it go, and then the score starts coming in and sounding similar to what the howling sounded like. And I thought that was actually a really nice touch. And that's the type of simple, subtle stuff about the film that I actually honestly really appreciated. And even if you're not a fan of this film, because I know even a personal friend of mine does not care for this movie at all, and that's totally fine with me. I have no issues with that. It's not everyone's cup of tea. I can see why it definitely is. I can see why some people might find it slow paced but boring, but I thought it was fine. I thought it was a slow burn. It built up, and then it built up to a climax, and then it got increasingly more and more intense as the film went on. That's just my personal opinion on it, though. Um, Anyone could feel free to feel differently. But even if you're not a big fan of this film, I highly recommend picking up this DVD. And the Blu-ray also has all the same features. So if you want to get it on the Blu-ray, you can do that. But if you can't get your hands on the Blu-ray, then I highly recommend picking up this Anchor Bay DVD, because there's a 2-disc special edition that has a commentary with the director and producer Peter Locke. And it has a great documentary called Looking Back on the Hills of Eyes, which has interviews of Wes Craven, Peter Locke, Michael Berryman, Janus Blythe, Robert Houston, Susan Lanier, D. Wallace, and director of photography Eric Sarian. So it's a really one of the better documentaries I've seen lately dealing with a horror film. It's fascinating. It's also really entertaining. A lot of fun to watch. A lot of good trivia. Nuggets of trivia are revealed during that documentary. And a lot of the stuff that I mentioned in this review is from that documentary. And it also has a little documentary retrospective on the career of Wes Craven called The Directors, which talks about the films of Wes Craven. It's got a bunch of trailers. It's also got the alternate ending. So yeah, really good 2-disc special edition. Great features. If you can't find the DVD, you can pick up the Blu-ray, which has all the same features ported over. So even if you're not a fan of the film, I do recommend getting this film on Blu-ray or on DVD, this 2-disc special edition and DVD, just for the documentary and the Wes Craven director's retrospective. So yeah, but only if you're a really big fan of behind-the-scenes documentaries. If that's not your bag, then don't bother. But if you're a big fan of that stuff like I am, I do recommend this 2-disc special edition and the Blu-ray. So it has some really good features on it. Anyway, I really don't know what else to say about The Hills Have Eyes, except it was a rated out of 5 stars. I'm going to give it the film 4. I think it's a really solid film for what it is. I really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot for the most part. There were some things I thought it could have done a little bit better. The ending could be better and less abrupt, and it could have a little bit more violence. But overall, I thought it was a really I thought it was a good movie. I liked it. Anyway, thank you for watching my review of The Hills Have Eyes, and I will see you guys later. See ya.